You know what? I'm absolutely sick of people pretending this wasn't coming. I'm tired of the fake outrage, the phony shock, the manufactured disbelief flooding social media right now. Everyone's acting like Jade Cargill crossing that line was some unpredictable tragedy, like we couldn't see this freight train barreling down the tracks 4 months. Give me a break. This wasn't just an assault, this was a statement written in blood and broken pride, and if you didn't see it coming, you haven't been paying attention to a single thing that's been happening in WWE. Let me paint you a picture of what went down, because apparently, some of you need your memory refreshed. Rhea Ripley, the self-proclaimed eradicator, the woman who's terrorized the women's division 4 years, got absolutely demolished backstage by Jade Cargill in what can only be described as the most vicious, unrelenting, and downright brutal attack we've seen in recent memory. We're not talking about a shoving match that got out of hand. We're not talking about a few worked punches for the cameras. This was personal. This was visceral. This was Jade Cargill deciding that words weren't enough anymore and that the only language Rhea would understand was violence. And here's where it gets interesting, because while half the internet is clutching their pearls and crying about how unprofessional this was, the other half is celebrating Jade like she just liberated an entire division. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this before you rush to the comments. Was Jade Cargill justified in what she did? Does Rhea Ripley deserve any sympathy after everything she's put people through? Drop your honest answer below, because this is where the line gets blurry, and I guarantee you, the wrestling world is divided on this. Let's rewind and look at how we got here, because context matters, even when people want to ignore it for their narratives. Jade Cargill arrived in WWE with the kind of fanfare that only happens once in a generation. The woman is a physical specimen that makes Greek goddesses look inadequate. She walked into the company with an aura of invincibility, carrying the confidence of someone who's never tasted defeat, someone who genuinely believes she's the revolution this division desperately needs. And you know what? The numbers backed her up. Undefeated streak in AEW, dominating presence, legitimate athletic background, the works. This wasn't some developmental project hoping to find her footing. This was a complete package demanding respect. But respect is a funny thing in professional wrestling, isn't it? You can't just walk through the door and demand it. You have to earn it, take it, or in Jade's case, brutally extract it from the cold, unwilling hands of the established order. And at the top of that established order, Rhea Ripley, looking down from her throne with that trademark sneer, treating Jade like she was just another challenger who would eventually bow to the Eradicator. The tension started subtly. A dismissive comment here, a disrespectful gesture there. Rhea made it crystal clear that she didn't view Jade as a threat, didn't see her as an equal, and certainly didn't think she belonged in the same conversation as the women who'd actually paid their dues in WWE. That condescending attitude, that barely concealed contempt, it festered. Every interview where Rhea casually dismissed Jade's accomplishments. Every backstage segment where she'd walk past Jade without acknowledgement. Every social media post dripping with passive-aggressive shade. It all accumulated into a powder keg waiting for a spark. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. Remember that segment where Rhea was cutting a promo about her dominance, about how she'd conquered everyone worth conquering, about how there were no more legitimate challengers left? Jade interrupted, walked down that ramp with purpose, got in the ring, and got face-to-face with Rhea. The crowd was electric. This was the confrontation we'd been waiting for. Two absolute powerhouses, two women who refused to back down from anyone, standing inches apart with enough tension to power a small city. And what did Rhea do? She laughed. Not just a smirk, not just a confident chuckle. She threw her head back and laughed in Jade's face like this was the funniest joke she'd ever heard. She told Jade she was cute for thinking she belonged in that ring. She said Jade's undefeated streak didn't count because it wasn't in WWE. She questioned whether Jade had the toughness, the heart, the sheer brutality required to hang with someone like her. It was disrespect elevated to an art form, and you could see something change in Jade's eyes. The professional mask slipped, the cool demeanor cracked. For just a second, we saw raw, unfiltered rage. Here's a question for you: how much disrespect should someone tolerate before they snap? When does turning the other cheek become weakness instead of strength? Comment your thoughts below. Security separated them that night. Officials stepped in. Cooler heads supposedly prevailed. But anyone with half a brain could see this wasn't over. This was a temporary ceasefire in an inevitable war. The WWE universe was buzzing. Social media was on fire. Everyone was speculating about when, not if, these two would collide properly. Would it be at the next premium live event? Would it be for a championship? Would WWE build it slowly, letting the anticipation reach a fever pitch? Turns out, Jade Cargill doesn't care about WWE's booking plans. Fast forward to this past Monday. Rhea Ripley had just finished a match, another dominant victory where she decimated her opponent in under 5 minutes. She was walking backstage, still in her gear, probably riding high on that post-match adrenaline, when Jade appeared from absolutely nowhere. No warning, no dramatic music cue, no cameras conveniently positioned to catch every angle. This was raw, unscripted chaos, and it was glorious. Jade hit Rhea with a forearm that could have decapitated a lesser human being. Rhea stumbled, crashed into the concrete wall, and before she could even process what was happening, Jade was on her like a force of nature. Fists raining down with precision and power, each shot delivered with bad intentions. This wasn't a worked beatdown for television. This was legitimate anger being channeled into every strike. Crew members scattered. Producers started shouting into their headsets. People were pulling out their phones because when something this real goes down, you document it. Rhea tried to fight back, credit where it's due. The Eradicator isn't someone who just covers up and takes a beating. She threw elbows, tried to create separation, attempted to turn the tide. But here's the thing about Jade Cargill that people keep underestimating. She's not just strong, she's explosive. When she commits to violence, it's overwhelming and relentless. She grabbed Rhea by her hair, slammed her face first into her equipment crate, and the sound that made echoed through the entire backstage area. People who were there said it sounded like a car accident. But Jade wasn't done. Not even close. She dragged Rhea across the concrete floor, threw her into a stack of chairs that scattered everywhere, and then delivered what witnesses are calling the most devastating Jaded, her signature move, onto the unforgiving floor. No ring canvas to absorb impact. No give whatsoever. Just pure, unadulterated brutality. Rhea's body went limp. The area went silent except for Jade's heavy breathing and the frantic shouting of officials finally brave enough to intervene. It took 8 people to pull Jade off. 8. And even then, she was straining against them, screaming at Rhea, veins bulging in her neck, eyes wild with fury that hadn't been fully satisfied. Security formed a human barrier while medical personnel rushed to Rhea's side. And here's what's crazy, Jade didn't look remorseful. She didn't look shocked at what she'd done. She looked satisfied. She looked like someone who'd just settled a debt that was long overdue. The footage that eventually leaked online is absolutely insane. Multiple angles from various phones captured different moments of the assault. You can see the exact second Rhea realizes she's in serious trouble. You can see other superstars in the background, stunned into paralysis. You can see producers frantically trying to figure out how to handle a situation that spiraled completely out of their control. This wasn't part of the show. This was real life colliding with sports entertainment in the most violent way possible. Now here's where opinions split dramatically. One camp is saying Jade went way too far, that there's no justification for that level of violence, that she should face serious consequences including potential termination. They are arguing that professional wrestling requires trust, that you can't just assault your co-workers, that there are proper channels and proper ways to handle disrespect. They are pointing to Rhea being taken to a local medical facility as evidence that Jade crossed a line that should never be crossed. The other camp, they are calling Jade a hero. They are saying Rhea has been a bully for years, that she's dished out humiliation and disrespect to countless women, that someone finally gave her a taste of her own medicine. They are arguing that WWE's scripted nature has made people soft, that old-school wrestling was built on real animosity and legitimate fights backstage. They are celebrating Jade for keeping it real in an industry that's become too sanitized, too corporate, too fake. What do you think? Was this assault justified or did Jade go too far? I need to know where you stand on this, so drop your opinion in the comments. Let's talk about the aftermath because it's somehow even more dramatic than the attack itself. WWE released a statement within hours, one of those carefully worded corporate responses that says absolutely nothing while trying to sound serious. They acknowledged an altercation between Jade Cargill and Rhea Ripley, confirmed that Rhea was being evaluated by medical professionals, and stated they were conducting a full investigation. No mention of suspensions. No mention of consequences. Just vague corporate speak that leaves everything open-ended. Rhea's status is currently unknown. Reports are conflicting. Some sources say she suffered a concussion and possible broken ribs. Others claim she's already been cleared but WWE is holding her off television for storyline purposes. There's even rumors, though unconfirmed, that Rhea is furious about the whole situation and has demanded a no-holds-barred match with Jade where she can get her revenge. The speculation is running wild, and WWE's silence is only fueling the fire. Jade, meanwhile, has been radio silent on social media. No statement, no apology, no explanation, just eerie silence that somehow speaks volumes. That silence says she doesn't feel the need to justify her actions. It says she'd do it again. It says this is just the beginning of something much bigger. Behind the scenes, the locker room is apparently divided. Some veterans are reportedly furious with Jade, believing she violated the unspoken rules that keep everyone safe. They are concerned that if this behavior goes unpunished, it opens the door for others to settle disputes with violence, creating an unsafe work environment. These are legitimate concerns from people who've been in the business for decades and understand the delicate balance required to keep everyone safe while still delivering compelling television. But there's another faction, mostly younger wrestlers, who are quietly supporting Jade. Not publicly, because that would be career suicide, but in private conversations, they are expressing understanding. They've watched Rhea operate for years. They've seen the dismissive attitude, the political maneuvering, the way she's used her position to keep others down. They are not necessarily condoning the violence, but they understand the frustration that led to it. Here's something nobody's really talking about but needs to be addressed: the racial dynamics of this situation. Jade Cargill is a black woman who's had to fight for respect in an industry that hasn't always been welcoming to people who look like her. Rhea Ripley is a white woman who's been positioned as the face of the division, given every opportunity, every accolade. When Rhea dismissed Jade's accomplishments, told her she didn't belong, treated her like an outsider, was there more to it than just standard wrestling rivalry? I'm not making accusations, but it's a conversation worth having, and the fact that so few people in wrestling media are addressing it is telling. Think about this: how often do we see established stars genuinely threatened by newcomers? How often do we see them resort to dismissing someone's entire career as not counting because it happened elsewhere? The gatekeeping in professional wrestling is real, and it often falls along very predictable lines. Jade Cargill represents something WWE historically hasn't embraced: an independent, confident, physically dominant black woman who refuses to play by their rules or wait her turn. That's threatening to an established order built on very different principles. Question for discussion: do you think race played any role in how Rhea treated Jade, or is this reading too much into a standard wrestling rivalry? This is a tough one, but I want to hear thoughtful responses in the comments. The business implications of this are fascinating. WWE is in a weird position. On one hand, they can't be seen as endorsing workplace violence. They have corporate sponsors, shareholders, and a public image to maintain. On the other hand, this is the most buzz the women's division has gotten in months. Social media engagement is through the roof. Every wrestling news site is covering it. Casual fans who haven't paid attention in years are suddenly interested again. Violence sells, and WWE knows this better than anyone. My prediction? They'll suspend Jade for a few weeks, let the heat build to nuclear levels, and then bring her back for a massive program with Rhea that will culminate at one of their Big Four pay-per-views. They'll frame it as too big for TV, market it as a legitimate fight where both women want to hurt each other, and it'll probably be one of the highest drawing angles of the year. WWE has always been brilliant at turning real-life controversy into money, and this situation is a goldmine waiting to be exploited. But here's what worries me: what if this is real? What if Jade and Rhea genuinely hate each other to the point where they can't work together safely? Professional wrestling requires an incredible amount of trust between performers. You're putting your body, your health, your career in someone else's hands every time you step in that ring. If that trust is broken, if there's legitimate animosity that can't be set aside for the sake of the business, we could be looking at a disaster waiting to happen. Remember Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels? Their real-life hatred led to the Montreal Screw-Up, one of the most controversial moments in wrestling history that had ripple effects for years. Remember when Centimeter Punk's backstage altercations destroyed relationships and eventually contributed to his departure from wrestling? Real heat can elevate an angle, but it can also burn everything down if it's not managed properly. The women's division needed a shake-up, that much is undeniable. The same names cycling through the same feuds with predictable outcomes was getting stale. Jade Cargill was supposed to be the injection of fresh energy, the new blood that would elevate everyone around her. Instead, she's created chaos, division, and uncertainty. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends entirely on what happens next. Here's what I want you to consider: wrestling is at its best when the line between reality and fiction is blurred so effectively that we can't quite tell what's real anymore. The greatest angles in history all had elements of legitimate tension behind them. Stone Cold vs. Mr. McMahon worked because there were real power dynamics being explored. The Shield's dissolution hit hard because those guys genuinely loved working together. The mega powers exploding felt real because the chemistry between Hogan and Savage was undeniable. Is Jade versus Rhea about to become the defining rivalry of this generation? Could this be the feud that finally puts the women's division on completely equal footing with the men in terms of mainstream attention and cultural impact? Or is this a powder keg that's going to explode in WWE's face, creating problems that can't be scripted away? One more question before we wrap this up. If you were in charge of WWE, how would you handle this situation? Would you suspend Jade, fire her, push her as an anti-hero, book an immediate match? I'm genuinely curious about your fantasy booking here, so get creative in the comments. The reality is that Jade Cargill just changed the entire trajectory of WWE's women's division with one brutal assault. She's proven she's not here to play politics, kiss rings, or wait her turn. She's proven that disrespect will be met with violence. She's proven that she's willing to risk everything to establish herself as the dominant force in this company. Whether you love her or hate her for it, you can't ignore her anymore. Rhea Ripley, meanwhile, is facing the biggest challenge of her career. Not just physically recovering from this attack, but recovering her credibility. The Eradicator got eradicated. The woman who terrorized everyone else got terrorized herself. How does she come back from this? Does she seek revenge? Does she try to prove she's still the most dominant force? Does she acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, she underestimated Jade Cargill in ways that nearly cost her everything? This story is far from over. In fact, it feels like we're just getting started. The assault was chapter 1 of what could be a generational epic if WWE doesn't screw it up. The next few weeks are absolutely critical. How WWE books this, how they explain it, how they manage the very real emotions involved will determine whether this becomes a legendary angle or a cautionary tale about what happens when reality and fiction collide too violently. What I do know is this: professional wrestling just got a whole lot more interesting. The women's division just got elevated to must-see television. And Jade Cargill just announced to the entire world that a new era has begun, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The assault happened. The damage is done. The line has been crossed. Now we wait to see if WWE can harness this chaos into something legendary, or if it all comes crashing down in spectacular fashion. Either way, Wrestling Zone 1 will be here to break it all down. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because this story is developing by the hour, and you don't want to miss a single update. Hit that like button if this breakdown gave you a new perspective on the situation. And seriously, flood those comments with your takes because I need to know where the Wrestling Zone 1 community stands on this. Are you Team Jade or Team Rhea? Was this justified or criminal? Is this the greatest angle of the year or the beginning of a disaster? Sound off below. Let's have this conversation because wrestling is at its best when we're all passionately debating what it means and where it's going. This is the content that makes you feel something, and that's what professional wrestling should always be about. Until next time, this has been Wrestling Zone 1, and remember, in this business, the line between real and fake is whatever we decide it is on any given night.